As a young person, I was really interested to hear about the millennials in your life and your son and your advice to him. If it doesn't work out, go back to grad school at 28. And that's actually what I did.
Oh, good for you.
And I'm now a librarian. But I find myself arcing back to writing and making art. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on advice for young people giving it another shot.
Well, one way I can respond to it is I think that some wise man once said you have till 35 to kind of figure out what you really are there to do in life. I figured it out sooner, but I was sort of I got started earlier in a certain way. This is when Malcolm Gladwell is one of the presiding deities in our household, because my children adore him, as do all reading people. And in fact, he's referred to in our household as "not that you're not Dad Malcolm," because whenever he comes over for dinner, the kids afterwards say, "Malcolm is just the best storyteller in the world. Not that you're not Dad." And that, and he has this thing about 10,000 hours, right? So Luke, my son, said to me once, "Do you buy this 10,000 hours thing of Malcolm's?" And I said, "Well, I love Malcolm, but probably he's playing around with it a bit." And Luke worked out, when did you start writing seriously? And he figured out my 10,000 hours were up from when I first started writing seriously in May of 1986. And that was when I had my first piece published in the New Yorker. It was May of 1986. So I called up Malcolm, and I said, "You son of a bitch, how did you know this works?" And Malcolm said, "Well, the joke is, the parlor game of it is that we never really think in hours. All 10,000 hours is 6 years. And if you think about it, any professional program you undertake is a 6-year program. From the time you walk into medical school until the time they let you touch a patient is 6 years. Every PhD takes 6 years. I bet if you looked at your own development, Mark, from the time you first walked into a newspaper office until you really knew what you were doing was 6 years.
Yeah, it's been a decade and I still don't know.
Well, and seriously, until the time you got a job, a really responsible job, where you had to do it. You had to do it yourself. You had to make decisions, and not send them to someone else. And so the good news is, and I really believe this is true, if you have just normal, and this was the point Malcolm was trying to make. He wasn't trying to make the point is there's no such thing as talent, there's only perseverance. It's that if you have a normal amount of talent and pluck and 6 years worth of perseverance, you can almost inevitably make something work for yourself. Now, you may not be able to make it work at the highest level you imagine. The Beatles played 10,000 hours in Hamburg, and they became the Beatles. Jerry and the Pacemakers paid 10,000 hours and became Jerry and the Pacemakers. But we know them. They were musicians. They were professional musicians. They weren't the Beatles, but they were professional musicians. And I always tell my assistants and so on that that's the case, if you make that commitment. The trick is, coming back to your question, is that when you're 22, 6 years seems like an eternity. When you're my age, 6 years, you're glad 6 years is nothing. I can't even remember things that happened 6 years ago. When you're your age, 6 years seems like a long time. But I think people should always know that inside, that if whatever I've done in the past, I'm 28, 29, I'm going to put 5 years, let's say, into this. And it's very unusual. As I say, you may not achieve your ultimate ambition, but it's very rare for someone not to achieve a satisfactory end to that kind of perseverance, at least in my experience.